Hello and welcome to the Irish Angle on Jump to It. As usual, I'm joined by Emma Nagle and Johnny Ward, and we're going to have a look at all the topics around the horse racing industry at the minute, and several to talk about, plus the racing from last week. There was some interesting stuff, particularly Shishkin. So Emma, Johnny, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vincent.
Thanks, Vinny.
All right, now we'll start off. First of all, Johnny, just something that I was wanted to bring up with you is you were in Dundalk last week and Ronan McNally had a winner. So you had a chat with him about his impending appeal. How did that go?
Yeah, it was a strange one, Vinny. It was, again, one of these days, like when I'm doing the TV coverage, it's generally kind of a fairly run-of-the-mill day, but often it's fairly extraordinary things happen, and V-Dancer obviously won for Ronan. We spoke a good bit about the case on the show in recent weeks, and he's obviously facing effectively a career-ending ban for the infringements that the IHRB has come up with. I suppose there are a couple of things on this. Some people said I was very easy on him in the interview, and in fairness, I was. I mean, I wasn't there to act on behalf of the IHRB, and the IHRB didn't have the ability to put its side of the story forward on the day, and I mentioned that as well. So I was more just kind of getting, I suppose, the human side of it from him and his son Tubbs, and I was surprised the following Morning Ireland, RT Radio's kind of flagship show. It might be the most popular radio show in the country, actually led with it in its sports news with Des Cahill and played about 3 minutes of the interview. So I was surprised at the reach of Ronan McNally's interview, in the sense of it obviously did actually come across as something that was quite significant. And in fairness to, I think we're all in agreement that 12 years seems a little bit mad, but I think it definitely showed the human side of it. For all this, I don't think any of us here is suggesting that Ronan didn't do anything wrong. I just thought it was good to get his view across and maybe give another angle to the whole thing.
Yeah, what I found interesting about the interview is that he's talking about he thinks he'll succeed at the appeal, but it sounds like what he considers success to be is just not to be a disqualified person. He doesn't seem to be worried too much about the suspension and the fact that he's not going to be able to train horses. He just wants to be able to be close to his son when his son starts becoming a jockey in whatever 4 years' time and so on, and be a part of that story. Is that what you took from it, Emma? Do you think he'd be happy enough not to train anymore? The number of years isn't really relevant. It's just the disqualified person element of it.
Well, I'm sure he'd still like to keep training if he could, but I think from what Ronan was saying, is the disqualified person is kind of the biggest kind of blow to him with the sentencing, and we alluded to that last week as well on the. I think a lot of the time when the IHRB are making their sentencing, they take in kind of a lot of outside circumstances into account, a person's family circumstances and that, but they didn't seem to do that here, because I think anyone who follows racing would probably have heard of Tubbs McNally. He's been on ITV Racing. He's kind of a social media sensation nearly, and for the IHRB not to consider the effect that would have on Ronan's actual life. I mean, taking away the fact that he's training horses, just the fact that he can't kind of be a part of such a big element of his son's life. He can't go racing with him. I think that was probably the biggest blow to him, and that came across in his interview. But yeah, regardless of what he did and didn't do wrong, I think that was a big blow just to a person outside of sport. It's kind of more of an everyday life thing rather than your job. So yeah, that's I think that's probably the biggest thing for him. And if he could get that overturned, I think it would be a big result. You'd imagine that the time of the sentence, the 12 years, will be reduced as well. But how much that will be, it's kind of hard to know. But you'd imagine he'll probably have the disqualified person kind of tag taken off him. You'd expect anyway.
Yeah, I thought that. What do you think, Johnny? Has he any rabbit up his sleeve here to pull out and show us that he wasn't really guilty of a lot of these offences that he was charged with? Johnny gone, is he?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, yeah.
You were gone on me.
I just lost it slightly at the end of it. Yeah, I that's probably an interesting take on it, Vinny. I think that you mightn't be far off there. I mean, he certainly focused in on not being able to go to Cheltenham, for example, and stuff that really seems completely over the top in the sense of the disqualified person. Now, let's be honest, we've seen people in the past who are like given suspensions and effectively just carry on as normal and do it under another name. I'm not saying no one's going to do that, but maybe there's an element of, if you're a disqualified person, that just rules you out of the game entirely. But I think I can't really see him getting his license back or anything like that. So maybe he is looking for something that allows him to stay in the sport at the very least and see his son develop.
Yeah, I'd agree. Okay, look, we'll move on from that. First of all, we'll go into the racing from last weekend. Big one was Shishkin. Horse came back to probably somewhere near his best, I'd imagine. What did you make of that, Emma?
Yeah, it was massive by Nicky to get him back. I think when we were talking about him last, he was running over 2 miles, kind of very disappointingly. He kind of showed his spark again. Whether it was just this step up in distance is what kind of brought him back to himself, or he obviously had his issues apart from just not being totally suited to the 2 miles. But it was a massive performance, and now he's shooted to the top of the Ryanair chase market. Look, it's a real pity now that Allaho is out of the race, because what a race that would have been to see Allaho and now Shishkin back to kind of near his best. The Ryanair would have been some race. Like at the moment, it's probably looking like he's or so we saw Janadeel as well over the weekend, who was second to Allaho last year in it. But you'd imagine Shishkin, if he's at his best, he'll probably take an awful lot of beating in the Ryanair. Few questions, I think, after the race as well. Would he go to the Gold Cup? Would he stick to the 2.5 or to the 2.5 in the Ryanair? Look, I'm not. A lot of people in racing don't like the Ryanair. To be honest, I don't really have a big problem with it. It's kind of, not every horse stays 3 mile 2. Not every horse is quick enough for 2 miles. The Ryanair is always a very exciting race to me. We've seen some very good winners over the years. Allaho, Min, just to name 2. Q-Card won a Ryanair. So I'd be happy enough to see Shishkin just sticking at the Ryanair distance this year. Probably maybe try with the King George then next year, and maybe have a tilt to the Gold Cup the following year. But it was some performance by Nicky to get him back. I think he alluded to Sprinter Sacre-esque after the race. Seeing them come back, and there was a great video of Nicky circulating on social media after the race, his celebration. So how much it meant to him. It's great to see a horse like him back, because he's kind of one that draws the public in as well.
Yeah, Supreme Novice Hurdle winner, Arkle winner, and possibly now a Ryanair winner. What do you make of it, Johnny? Did the tongue strap make the difference? He did win surgery earlier in the year. Not sure if that was it. Was it the trip? What brought about the revelation in the form?
Yeah, I was looking at the race and thinking, if this race were over 2 miles, I still think Shishkin's going to win very easily. He just looked like he was back to something like his best. And in fairness, I would have probably been one of those who'd been in the camp that he looked like he was a little bit gone at the game. And Nicky's, obviously, as Emma alluded to, has great record of bringing back horses. But I'd nearly run him in the Gold Cup now if I were his owner. I just think the whole prospect of that, and the fact that he stayed so well on Saturday, suggests it's really not a mad idea. And maybe stepping him up in trip. I mean, I agree with them on the Ryanair. It's one of those races they brought in that I was entirely comfortable with, because I think there's too much of an extremity between the Gold Cup and the Champion Chase. And if you look at the likes of Native Upmanship, he was the horse that always came to mind for me. He would have loved the Ryanair, and I think the Ryanair absolutely has its place. Even if it were a 3-day Cheltenham, I think the Ryanair would have its place. But at the same time, for Shishkin, considering all he's achieved, I think the Gold Cup, it's almost too tempting at this stage not to go there, because the Ryanair isn't the Gold Cup, and he's already won a Champion Chase, so winning a Ryanair would be grand. But to go at the Gold Cup, if I were the owner, I'd be very tempted.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't. I think it's a huge leap of faith to think he might stay 3.25 miles. But look, you never know. It was such a leap of faith what he did at the weekend, because I really wasn't expecting that. I didn't think we'd see him back to his best. But there you go. Shows what can happen with horses, and they make liars of us all the time. The other one then was Janadeel winning the Red Mills Chase. Rachel Blackmore on board. That was a good performance too. Horse was beaten 14 lengths by Allaho in Cheltenham last year. Finished 5th in an Albert Bartlett to Monkfish a couple of years ago as well. Is that a horse that's a contender for the Ryanair? What do you think, Johnny?
I don't think he'd beat Shishkin in terms of Shishkin's performance on Saturday. I think Shishkin is a horse to beat. And Janadeel has shown his vulnerability in the race. I thought it was a good performance Saturday. I wouldn't have him as the winner of the Ryanair, but he'd certainly have a solid place chance, I suppose.
Yeah. Emma, did you give him a chance, or what did you make of that particular race in Goran?
Yeah, it was a good race, I suppose. You kind of wanted to see Hot and Calor go on and kind of do what he threatened to do when he came down the last day. But the the form of that race maybe now was looking a bit suspect as well. I think Fakir Dadaris was very, very disappointing behind Shishkin. Like, he looks like a horse who's kind of going backwards more than forwards. Even, he's not. I think he's only 8 or 9. So you'd imagine, he definitely didn't own his race against Shishkin. As good as Shishkin was, it's kind of hard to say that he ran his race. So it's another kind of disappointment for the Ryanair. But look, Janadeel, he's I think I'd give him a good chance to. He'll run a big race in the Ryanair. I think if Shishkin's on song, kind of like we saw the last day, if he improves again, even, I don't think he'll get. I don't think he'll get too close to him. But he's a good place chance. I agree with Johnny on that.
Yeah, I thought Rachel gave Janadeel a great ride, to be honest with you. Put the horse asleep out the back and just came with the one run up the straight. I thought it was a good performance. The other horse in that, Capadano, which hadn't run for quite a while as well, hadn't run since it won a Grade 1 at the Punchestown Festival. That was given £9 to those horses, and that, so it probably wasn't too bad a run either, having done the donkey work out in front. You could see improvement there, but not sure where that horse goes. It's only got one entry in Cheltenham, which is the Gold Cup. Can't necessarily see that being a contender there at this stage, particularly with the other ammunition the stable has in the race. The other race then was that Red Mills Trial Hurdle, where we'd Sharjah beaten by Fildor. That was a bit of a turnaround. I wasn't quite expecting that either, but I suppose Sharjah is not quite what he was. And then you've got Fildor was coming back from a blip over fences. Hurdles is probably more his game. What do you think, Johnny?
Well, yeah, like I suppose maybe hurling is more his game, but like he was very, very good at his fences, and getting the allowances this year, he was a really nice prospect in novice chases. But I sort of wonder with Sharjah at the moment. Maybe Sharjah, he's beaten the third horse by length as well. Maybe he's just not the horse he was. He's 10 now, and things might be kind of catching up with him. But good ride by Jordan Gainford. It was. Again, the two races very much dominated by sort of two stables, Vinny, and obviously the 1, 2, 3 for Willie in the other race isn't ideal, but I think this will be interesting for Gordon now to see going forward what he'll do with Fildor. I think for me he's probably more effective when he gets a little bit of ease in the ground, but I wouldn't be afraid to go back over fence with him. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and then with the third horse in it, which Gordon also trains, Dr. Bravo. It's only beaten a length, as you say, by Sharjah, a length and a half by Fildor. For a novice, that's a fair run, isn't it? I was getting weight, in fairness, which is just weight for age allowance. But that was a good performance. It's 20-1 for the Supreme, 20-1 for the Ballymore. Not sure where it goes, but what did you make of that race, Emma?
Yeah, I suppose it was an exciting race to watch for the sellout crowd in Goran, I think, which is worth noting. I think it was free entry in Goran on Saturday, and it paid its dividends. I think there was no tickets left at the gate. You had to have a ticket to get in the door, which kind of showed if you make it cheap, people will go racing. Basically, I think there was a good young crowd there as well, which kind of tackles some of the issues that are kind of coming out at the moment. I think the BHA are saying young people don't have an interest in racing. Well, obviously here in Ireland they do, and I think in England they do as well. I think those issues are being inflated a bit, but yeah, the race like the Sharjah and Fildor race, it's exciting for a crowd to watch. Seeing a favourite turned over, I thought Fildor was very good. It's interesting to see where he'll go next. Will he go back over fences? Will he stay hurdling? Obviously, he's not champion hurdle quality. So, where will Gordon send him next? I'm not too sure. Did he mention a county hurdle? I could be wrong on that now. But Dr. Bravo in behind the two of them, though, was very impressive for a novice. As you said, he ran a massive race. Sharjah probably just underperformed a bit. Maybe he wouldn't like the bog that was there on Goran that day. So disappointing by him. But, it was exciting kind of racing all the way through the day in Goran. It was great to see.
Yeah, good stuff. Look, we'll move on to a couple of the issues around the sport. First one is whips, which is going to be a definite issue come Cheltenham, I think. The new rules are in place. What do you make of them, Emma? Are they correct?
That's a good question. Look, I think you'd be kind of glad to be in Ireland at the moment, because we don't seem to be following suit with the whole trying to appease people who, probably will never have an interest in racing. I think Ted Walsh, there was kind of the clip of Ted Walsh circulating again at the weekend, what he said was, racing is always trying to appease people who, won't be happy until the sport is gone, which I think is very true. Look, no sport will please everyone. And for me personally, I think, the whip rules as they are absolutely fine. I don't think, horses don't get hurt by the whip, and it's just plain as simple as that. People who go racing, I don't think ever really have a problem with the odd time you might see the overuse of whip and you might say, God, that didn't look great, but it's very, very rare when you'd actually see that. Was there a conversation about the Gold Cup? Was it the head of the BHA was saying that this had to come in before Cheltenham, the changes to the whip regulations had to come in before Cheltenham, but how many people actually at Cheltenham are going to say, these whip regulations made the week a lot better than it was? No one's going to know any difference. The only difference would be it might take away from the week more. It's not going to add anything to the week. If we see horses disqualified, if we see jockeys getting long bans for very minor offences, it'll take a lot away from Cheltenham. It's not going to add anything to the week for me. I think it's pandering to people who will never be involved in the sport. I think there was questions asked to young people about the whip, but if you ask someone who isn't really interested in something, they're not going to have a whole pile of knowledge around it. I think it's kind of more a thing of informing people of the facts of the rules of racing, the whip and all this. And if people knew more about it, they'd be less negative. But at the same time, I would be friendly with a lot of people who aren't involved in horse racing. I go racing, there's kind of the big race day in Cork at Easter, and a lot of people who wouldn't be kind of regular race goers would go to that day, you'd say. And I don't think I've ever met, not that I can remember, I don't think I've ever met anyone that has said anything about the whip in racing. A young person, people go out and they enjoy the spectacle of it all, and it's not like 15, 20 years ago where maybe they're kind of using a more barbaric kind of stick where horses might be getting marked and it looks a bit worse. Now it's, they're getting a few flicks on the arse with a padded stick, and no one thinks anything of it. So yeah, no, it all just seems ridiculous to me, and I hopefully Ireland doesn't follow suit with it, because it'll probably be the downfall of the sport rather than the saving grace for me.
Right, Johnny, you've got strong views on this one too, have you?
I think Emma spoke very, very well there on the issue, and Emma comes from a racing yard. I don't, and this is the greatest load of rubbish essentially ever. Are the authorities in Britain, are they organising for school kids to go to horse racing yards and get them into racing and show them how well horses are looked after in yards and make them love the horse? Because I've said this several times. If you put 100 kids riding a horse for the first time, I'd say half of them would absolutely fall in love with it. And even if they're not riding the horse, arrange school visits, bring them to yards, and kids absolutely love horses. Bring them to yards, educate them about racing, get them into racing at an early stage. I was in Dundalk Wednesday. There were, students there who seemed to be having a good day. I doubt they were too worried about the whip. And if you start to tinker with it in Ireland to the extent that they are in Britain, you'd be laughed out the gate, because it's just not an issue. It is not an issue. The padding on the whip itself, if you smack it across your hand, it doesn't hurt. Horses are unbelievably well looked after. They're also unbelievably strong. And the issues, we hopefully we'll talk about this, British racing is going to have catastrophic issues with ground going forward. Catastrophic issues with ground. It has catastrophic issues with failing field sizes, with prize money, with this or that. It doesn't have a whip issue at all, as far as I'm concerned. We're trying to appease people who for a start, are wrong because they think racing is cruel. Racing is not cruel. Simple as that. It's cruel to eat a chicken fillet roll, if you ask me, because a chicken fillet roll comes from an animal that had a terrible life and was reared in an area completely alien to it, was reared for consumption as an animal. Horses are extremely well looked after, and British racing is so insecure and paranoid about this, it's self-mutilating as far as I'm concerned, and it's a joke that this is an issue now with Cheltenham coming forward.
Okay, talking about Cheltenham, right? How big an issue is it going to be, particularly for the Irish riders? You have the English-based jockeys, a lot of them are Irish, but they're English-based. They've had a month of a trial run of this where they haven't got any suspensions over it or anything else. The basic rule, the main one, is you're only allowed to hit the horse 7 times now, is the new rule. In Ireland, it's 9. Yeah, just looking at Punchestown yesterday, we 2 jockeys in Punchestown were suspended for excessive frequency with the whip, so they hit them more than 9 times. Anything over 7 is going to be an infringement in the UK for Cheltenham. You've also got the anything going higher than the shoulder height with the whip as well, and hitting the horse in the correct position. Is this going to be a disaster for the Irish jockeys, Emma?
Yeah, I think more so than the frequency of the use, it's the over-the-shoulder height is going to be the big issue, because, the jockeys have kind of learned a certain style of riding the whole way through their careers. It might be 10 or 15 years for some of the riders, maybe even more, 20 years. And, to change your entire style of riding just for a few days is going to be very, very difficult. I think I heard JJ Slevin talking on Nick Luck's podcast during the week, and he said that he had been riding in the north of England kind of regularly enough in the last few weeks, and he's been kind of trying to practice the over the shoulder height thing more so than anything else, which that's going to be very, very hard for Irish riders to adapt to in the heat of the moment, especially. You might go out thinking before the race, I have to do this and that, but once they get actually into the heat of the battle, when they're driving the horses out, let's say in a Gold Cup or a champion hurdle, it's going to come down to muscle memory more than anything else, and it's going to be very, very hard for them to kind of comply fully with the rules that are now in place in England, because it's not what we have here. They haven't gotten used to it at all, and it could have it could cause awful lot of drama in Cheltenham, in my opinion, because if we're seeing horses getting thrown out of races and jockeys getting massive bans, it's gonna take away from the spectacle an awful lot, and it's something that it's probably too late to change now, but I think it was a massive, massive mistake to bring it in, especially this time of the year. Maybe wait until the summer if they wanted to bring it in that badly and give people some kind of chance to get used to it, maybe in smaller races in England if they were travelling over. But to bring it in kind of so close to Cheltenham with such an Irish contingent of jockeys heading over, it's going to be very, very hard.
Yeah, I think it will. I think there's going to be problems. Johnny, what do you think?
Well, like if you read, I don't know if Chris Cook was writing about this in the Race Post as well. Like, say if there's a big issue with regard to disqualification at Cheltenham, that's actually going to be the top story almost on the day. So you're advertising the problem in the first place, or the perceived problem, and you're actually putting it out there about the whip rather than focusing on the race. And then, like I do have some sympathy for those who are trying to run the sport over there, because I do remember being in Cheltenham a few years back, and on the day of Cheltenham, the BBC was leading the first day of Cheltenham, which is, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years ago, pre-pandemic anyway. And the BBC led, I remember watching the telly that morning in Cheltenham, and the BBC led with equine fatalities, and Cheltenham trying to cut down on equine fatalities. Like the greatest show on earth in racing, and they were focusing on something like that, which for me shows that the BBC has kind of a certain kind of view of racing that has changed over the years. So I do get the perception thing, but as you've both said, for the Irish jockeys, this is tough, and I'm not per se against disqualification of a horse when you've blatant excessive use of the whip, but this could be an issue that actually ends up advertising the whip issue and suppresses it, if that makes sense, on the day. And it's something that racing doesn't need. It has enough problems without this.
Yeah, I agree. I think they shouldn't have done it. Certainly, as Emma has said as well, Cheltenham is a bad time to be bringing this in, the first high-profile meeting, particularly as half the jockeys, or the majority of jockeys riding there, are not UK-based, so they haven't had that whole trial period. So, look, we'll wait and see. There'll be more about this, no doubt, in the aftermath of Cheltenham. The ground, that's going to be an issue for Cheltenham too. No rain, or very little rain in the last few weeks in the UK, so they're struggling there with that. What do you think, Johnny? Will they have to water the BJs out of it?
Yeah, I guess we shouldn't forget last year, was it the day 2 of Cheltenham, where it was a forecast that really wasn't expected, where they got a lot of rain, and Cheltenham, I think rather harshly, really, they got slack because, Paul Nicholls obviously pulling out horse. They got slack because the ground went a little bit too soft, even though it was sort of underneath it wouldn't have been that soft. And I think even by like the Thursday morning, it was nearly good to soft again or whatever. So it was just one of those days. But like, the climate is just completely, it's so alarming. And, if we divorce ourselves from the potential end of the world in my lifetime, and we actually talk about the relevance of racing, the last few days have been really, really worrying, in the sense that we had a meeting called off. We had a catastrophic amount of non-runners in Newcastle again because of watering issues. We had a match race in, was it Newbury, because it turned into a walkover because of this issue. And I was just on to sort of a few people in racing today, Vinny, about this, and Larkin Wire just trying to explain what was involved in Leopardstown ahead of the Dublin Racing Festival, where they were applying 10 millimetres every second or third day in the lead up to the meeting, as well as keeping the moisture in it throughout the summer. they've done other things as well. And Tim Husband's just saying it's not straightforward. It's not like just lumping water on it. But this has to be done so far out now. And it's if we don't have much rain between now and Cheltenham, that's going to be bad for Cheltenham. What about the flat courses? Like, because British racing is in need of watering. Simple as, it's not raining enough in Britain for a lot of these tracks. So if you need water, you need to tap into the local water supply. That could be a serious issue this year if we have drought again, and which we probably will. Will the water simply be available? And for me, the BHA should be looking into this, should be looking into getting the watering system right, because it's 100% going to be a big issue going forward. They may have to actually start using new ways of getting water effectively, whether that's desalination or whether it's treating water like sewage water and turning it back into water that you can use like they do in other countries, because this is definitely going to be a serious issue going forward, not only for the flat in the summer, but when we have grounds in February, in the middle of February, calling race meetings off. This is going to be a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe, and I'm not sure if we're taking it seriously enough yet. I have massive sympathy for the racecourse staff, because it's a very, very difficult job.
Oh, they can't win with this, can they? Because if they water and the rain comes, it's a complete disaster, as we saw with Cheltenham last year, as we've seen at other meetings as well. And then if it doesn't come and they didn't water, there's all those issues around it. Anyway, look, we'll move on to tips of the week. Have you one from last week, Emma? Something that caught your eye particularly?
Yeah, look, I probably not the most left of field one, but Ballyburn, I thought, in the bumper for Willie Mullins yesterday, I thought he was just so impressive, the way he pulled so hard the whole way through the race on very, very gluey ground as well. And I think he surprised Patrick and Willie, because I think Willie said he put the goggles down turning into the straight, because he said there's no way he could win pulling like that. And he beat I think 2 good horses in behind him as well. I think he's around 12-1 now for the champion bumper, and I think he's probably a very good price, considering he's a very good looking Willie Mullins bumper winning horse. And just in the champion bumper as well. Sorry, just before you finish, it was interesting. Oisin Murphy took out his national hunt license. You'd wonder, maybe does Willie have him lined up for something in the champion bumper? I know he's ridden a bit for Willie on the flat during the summers, so he must have something lined up, you'd have to think, for the champion bumper. So I thought it was just an interesting one.
Well, if Willie runs all of his bumper horses in the champion bumper, I think we'll all get a ride at this stage, because he's got millions of them, hasn't he? I've never seen as many unbeaten horses in 1 yard. And of course, Gordon had a very good bumper winner as well over the weekend. What's it called? The Gigginstown one.
Brighter Days
it's
Ahead.
A half, or Brighter Days Ahead.
Brighter
That's
Days.
The one, isn't it? Yeah. Half sister to Mighty Potter is one. So that could be one too. Johnny, have you one that you saw that you liked over the weekend?
I'll give one from Dundalk Wednesday, actually. Bright Dick, I thought he was just touched off in that 7 furlong handicap. Luke Homer, I think, could have had 8 runners on the day. He did horse run well over hurdles actually yesterday as well. So his horses are definitely in a bit of form. And I think I was trying to inquire about this. Has Rip Van Winkle ever had a grandson or granddaughter win? Has Rip Van Winkle sired a horse who sired a winner? And I don't think he has, the more I looked into it. And Bright Dick is probably going to be the first one, I think. He's by Dick Whittington. Luke Homer has some really bizarre stallion choices, utterly bizarre at times, but maybe this lad will get a winner or two. And in fairness, the horses are running well. And just Emma mentioned Oisin Murphy there. What will happen is Oisin Murphy will beat a stablemate in the bumper for Willie Mullins, and it'll be all over the news, but he'll be done for excessive use of the whip, and the horse will be thrown out. That's the way it's going to probably fall apart.
Anything is possible. For me, I'll just finish off with one that I like. Is a horse that I actually napped at the weekend called Grandero Bello, trained by the Harties, owned by Nicky Henderson's sister. Won a novice chase. I'm impressed with this horse. I think this is it. Look, it's a lowish level horse, but it will win plenty of races going forward. Won't be seen at Cheltenham, but might be seen in the likes of Fairyhouse or Punchestown. But what I think is there's an interesting form line here. The previous day, Grandero Bello got beaten by Braun of Willie Mullins's. Braun was second prior to that to Jerry Calam, who's probably one of the best horses we have around, still unbeaten. I think Braun might be a little bit under the radar here. I think that could be still a fair horse, that Braun. So that might be one to look out for at big prices as well come Cheltenham. Look, anyway, thanks for the chat. Thanks for all your thoughts on the whip and the ground for that matter. And hopefully we'll see you all again next week. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.